Hey everyone, it's Brad and Josh here, and we welcome you to We'll Bring the Popcorn, the ultimate film and TV podcast.
On today's episode, we will be reviewing the new film, The Smashing Machine, and the final 2 episodes of Alien Earth.
Well, it's been 22 years since the original came out, but Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill films are finally getting the single cut in December. It's going to be called Kill Bill, The Whole Bloody Affair. It's going to be around 4 hours long. It's also going to include a new 7-minute animated sequence. I'm going to guess that's probably going to be in between the two films to kind of bridge the gap and lead us into them. But, you know, this has been talked about since the original came out in 2003, and when he was bringing the sequel out in 2004, that he wants to do a single cut that he's going to put out, and we've been waiting for it to either just come out at home or something else. But, you know, 22 years later, we finally have the full cut of that film.
Yeah, you figure it wouldn't have taken so long to finally get everything cut together. I love both of these movies. They're fantastic. I love Tarantino films as it is anyway, but this is one of my upper echelon Tarantino set of films. It's such a good story, and the fact that they're finally putting it together, that's a lot of time to commit to go seeing it in theaters, though. That's like over 4 hours for a movie. It's just like, I got to block off an entire day practically to just go see this film.
It's one Lord of the Rings extended edition.
Basically, yeah. Like now those I will make time for on a snowy day where I'll just, I'm not leaving the house and I'll just, watch those all day or whatever. But yeah, it's a lot to commit to, but I'm excited for it to finally, come through. It's, like I said, one of my favorite Tarantino films, and the set of films, since there's 2 of them. But it's pretty cool that they're getting cut together into one film. It'll be a fun watch.
Yeah, it's curious to see if he comments at all of why it took so long, whether it was him or something else, because we know he's been hyping up his final film for a while now. It was supposed to be a movie critic film. He canned that because he didn't feel like that was kind of strong enough to be his final film, but we don't really know if it was on him, if it was on the studio, exactly why it took over 20 years to get it done. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting after 20 years if it gets people to go to theaters to watch a 4-hour cut of it or not, or if they wait and see if we do finally get that on digital, where it's a little easier to do, a 4-hour thing. Because even if you need to pause a couple times or something else, like 4 hours is a big time commitment at theaters when you also throw in 25 minutes of previews before that you're spending 4.5 to almost 5 hours in a theater for a single cut of film. It is tough at times to be able to get to do that. I've done it on several occasions with some of the films, especially which I just joked about with The Lord of the Rings, when they've put those extended editions and done those back in theaters with that. But it's a big commitment to do that 4 hours. I'm curious to see how the box office is going to look for it. If it's just like, maybe it'll get about 1 million, or see exactly what it does, because it's Tarantino, but it's been over 20 years since these films have come out.
Yeah, it's hard to tell if it's going to have any type of significant commercial success, but you never know. I mean, people have waited around for far many other things to, that take that long to sit through and watch. But we'll see what the box office looks like for sure. I do want to pivot us now to talk about James Bond here. We've been talking about the search for who's going to play the next James Bond. Everybody seems to have a particular favorite that they want to see take on the role, but Denis Villeneuve has come out and said, once he's done filming Dune 3 next year, he's going to start the search for his Bond, but it feels like it's going to be kind of a reboot where they're going to skew in a much younger direction.
Yeah, so they're looking for somebody in their 20s or 30s, but they want someone who looks like they could strangle you or break your neck with their bare hands. So definitely sounds like they're staying with the grittiness that we got with Daniel Craig's. But this does rule out, because they're wanting an unknown, the fan favorites of Idris Elba and Henry Cavill. Even the very strange situation we had where Aaron Taylor Johnson was announced as Bond, but was never announced as Bond, but he was announced, but he was that was such a weird time that it's like, hey, Aaron Taylor Johnson's our new Bond. We never announced that, but everybody else announced it. It's going to roll them out for now, and probably for good, because you think how long it takes for one run. Like Daniel Craig's for, it was about 6 films, took 10 to 15 years
easily
through there. So you think 10 to 15 years for this person's run. Henry Cavill, especially Idris Elba, and even Aaron Taylor Johnson are going to be significantly older 50s, close to 60s by the time this Bond runs. That's going to pretty much end any chance of them coming back unless they, for whatever reason, decide they're going to do a much older Bond with the next installment.
Yeah, it's just going to be, if they're going to be a part of it, it's going to be in a completely different role at this point. But we'll see. The jury's still kind of out on it. I'm all for just rebooting and going younger. Like, I'm good with that. I know a lot of people that are more traditionalists is like, Bond's not really a younger, like they don't really dive too much into younger Bond necessarily, where it's usually a guy who's already more established and in his 30s or early 40s who's just like in the midst of fully being 007 at that point. So I could see some people having some issues with that, but I'm fine with them skewing younger. Let's go. Let's get somebody in there who, you know, is not the most popular house. Daniel Craig, like a lot of people, had major issues with him when he was cast, and he wound up being one of the best Bonds we've ever had.
And he was a little bit older Bond,
yeah,
too.
And he was a little older, but he was the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, not the typical, the stereotypical Bond that we had seen several other archetypes for before him. But I'm excited to see them try something new and break the mold and go a little bit younger and get somebody in there who could play Bond for the next 15 to 20 years. We'll see where that winds up.
Yeah, because there's a pretty stark contrast between like Pierce Brosnan to Daniel Craig of the difference that you had and just the seriousness, the grittiness of it, and especially having a blonde and blue-eyed Bond, but it worked out so well that he has some of the best Bond films that have come out. And there is a rumor that this could be an origin story of how he got recruited to MI6 and became 007. So it could be the very beginning of Bond, which could be fun to kind of see that, because we've kind of, with most of them, we've jumped, as you've said, already established, kind of there in the middle, could still be a little bit in the beginning, because, Casino Royale, like, we don't really fully see him be Bond until, like, the end, where he really shows himself as being 007. So there's always been a little bit of an origin-esque to it, but this is talking about going young and really showing maybe we're going to see what he was doing, what type of life or spying or whatever he was doing before he became 007, which could be a lot of fun. But when you got Denis, it's like, that's a guy who I'm going to watch everything, not only because his films are simply breathtaking with the cinematography, from, what he did with Blade Runner to, the Dune films and everything else. Like, he creates stunning visual films that really care about the heart and the soul of the story that he's telling.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be a spectacle no matter what comes out of it. I'm excited to see what he does when he gets his hands on it finally. Get Dune finished first. I mean, it feels like we wait far too long in between those films, but it sounds like when he's done with that, he's ready to jump into Bond, and I'm here for it.
Yeah. And speaking of another spectacle, the Simpsons movie came out back in 2007. And we've been waiting to see if there's going to be, because that was a huge hit for them.
Huge.
The Simpsons have been around since 1989. They've one of the longest running shows on television. You can go back and forth with everybody on the quality and how things have been with it. We've both talked about in the past how, like, the first probably 10 seasons of that, at least the first 10 seasons of that show, was just fantastic with the smart writing and stories that they told. 2027, we're finally getting the Simpsons movie sequel, which is funny because back in season 19, Bart did a chalkboard gag that says, I'm not going to wait 20 years to put out another movie. They are.
It's them being prognosticating again, where they seem to predict everything, even poking fun that it's going to take them that long to put another movie out. But yeah, you can argue about the show's quality all you want. The fact is, the Simpsons are still a huge intellectual property that there's a reason it's held on as long as it has, because, despite people saying it's not as high quality as it is, there's still a ton of people watching. If there weren't, it wouldn't be on the air. Like, it's still hugely popular. They have integrations everywhere. They have integrations in all of the major theme parks. Like, they're still a big deal and still widely known and loved. And it's still, like you said, I hold those first 10 to 15 seasons as like some of the best television ever, in my opinion. It's just so funny, so easy to just go back in and watch some of those old episodes, and they're still just as funny, still just as poignant now as they were back then. And it's really cool that they're finally getting another movie. Who knows what the heck it'll be about? But yeah, when that first movie came out, it was huge. It was everywhere. And I have a feeling when they come back to it again, it's just going to make a ton more money. And I'm excited to see what they do with it.
Yeah, because what kind of gags, what kind of stories, because the first one made fun of the EPA and being locked down in a bubble and everything else, and the Simpsons moving to Alaska to get away from stuff. Like, they went out of their norm with that as well. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly what type of story that they're gunning for with the second movie. And could this be the last one? Because you think another 20 years, I mean, Matt Groening and everyone else who's involved with it, another 20 years is going to be really pushing it for most of the creative team, the voice actors, everybody with it. Like, we've still got Simpsons renewed for a few more years, and like I said, it'll be on the air for like 38 seasons by the time the movie comes out in 2027. We don't know. Could the movie be the kind of grand finale to The Simpsons? Could this be not announced now, but could it be kind of marking the end of The Simpsons run?
I have a hard time seeing that just because they make so much money off of it. I'd personally love to see it get to like 40 seasons and then kind of end it at 40 seasons and just have it be like the end there, because like you said, everybody that's associated with the show is not getting any younger. Obviously, your main voice actors are all still a part of it, which is incredible given the length and longevity of the show. A lot easier when you're just lending your voice to it, but still, that's a long time commitment for anything. And there's not a single show or entity that I can think of that's been on for that long that has your main stalwarts of the show all still a part of it from the jump, which is incredible given, you know, obviously there's some minor characters and some side characters here and there who have had voices recast or characters no longer a part of the show because the voice actors have passed or for other reasons, but your core cast is the exact same as it was almost 40 years ago is incredible at this point.
Yeah, and we were just talking generally before we started recording, and we talked about how Fortnite is planning their next big update is going to be based around The Simpsons, that the map is going to be Springfield and stuff. So there's still, since 1989 to now, there's still such a love and a demand and everything for The Simpsons, which is just kind of wild. And that, you know, 2027 that's another big potential film in a year that's already jam-packed. But it's also interesting to note that the release date that it got was originally for an MCU film. So we've got Secret Wars coming out that year, and there was supposed to be another MCU film. Well, they dropped the MCU film, and The Simpsons took over that spot. So it's kind of interesting that The Simpsons took over an MCU release date.
Yeah, now it's supposedly just kind of veering off The Simpsons, just noting that I think Secret Wars is going to be the only MCU film that year, which is crazy because it's the follow-up to Doomsday, but that's the only film on the docket for that, and it's at the end of 2027, so you're getting like a 12-month gap between films, which isn't completely unprecedented because I can't remember if there was a film between Infinity War and Endgame or not.
Well, I mean, we've had Doctor Strange 3 semi-announced. We've had Shang-Chi 2 semi-announced.
Oh, sure.
So that means that's potentially 2028 or later before we even get those, and we've already waited a long time for Shang-Chi 2. Like, that pushes a lot out even further.
It's a lot, and that's definitely something they're going to have to think about. Something else that we've been kind of waiting to see if they're going to follow up on is, you know, the next Fast and Furious film, and I want to move in to talk about that, but there's a lot of weird sort of things going on around that film right now, and it's a big battle between Universal and the people that are making it, where Universal's wanting them to lower the budget significantly on this film, which, if you've watched any of these, they're high spectacle, high CGI, high budget films, and it's definitely a lot of infighting that leads us to wonder, like, is this movie actually going to get finished and get made?
Yeah, because it's been, 2023 is when Fast 10 opened up, and it was originally announced when they were doing that film that there was going to be a 10, 11, and 12, and that 12th film kind of just disappeared slowly out of their talking, like, yeah, we're ending it with 11 now, but didn't really talk about, why. But yeah, Fast 10 cost almost $400 million, and so it didn't turn as big of a profit as they wanted because it cost so much. So they're like, yeah, you need to cut $50 million from this budget if you want us to go forward with it, but there isn't a proof script. They don't have any of the actors signed on for it. I think Jason Momoa was asked about it not too long ago. Vin Diesel's been talking it up and everything else, talking about how they're going to bring Paul Walker's character Brian back to the final film, but it's also supposed to go back to LA and street racing and everything else, but it just all seems like it's kind of a big mess. Like, Vin's out here talking like they're about to go into production and everything's going well, and here's the story and here's everything else, and Universal's like, we haven't approved anything.
It's a hot mess, and it feels like such a disjointed effort that you gotta wonder what the quality of the film is going to be. I mean, these films have had humongous success commercially, like you said. They may not have turned a ton of profit, but several of these films back to back to back are $1 billion grossing films or relatively close to it. Like, these movies make a ton of money when they come out, and they're big hits not only here but internationally as well, where they make a ton of money overseas. Like, it's a big dollar film for them, and the fact that they can't all seem to get on board and on the same page, where, like you said, you might have Vin Diesel, who's probably the best source of it when it comes to talking about it, because he's, you know, the focal point in the heart of the franchise. But if you got Universal coming out like, we haven't approved anything, like, what are we doing? Like, what is the plan here? Are we getting on the same page? Do you have it? Have they just not presented the script to Universal for whatever reason? But I don't know. We'll see. It just sounds like a hot mess, and it's definitely interesting how they played it off like it was going to be up to a 12th film, and nobody's really talking about that because they can't get the 11th one together. How can you talk about the 12th film when you have no clue what you're doing for the 11th one yet? Like, it's a big disjointed mess, and I'm really curious to see what comes out of it.
Yeah, it's a budget said, as I said, almost $400 million for Fast 10. It's just exploding and getting bigger and bigger. And you do have, with the state of cinema and movies and stuff right now, that we're seeing comic book movies aren't performing like they normally do. Those were the cash cows of like, hey, we're going to have $1 billion every time one goes out. And we haven't even, like Superman, which was well reviewed and popular, did not, I think, cross 600 million. You had Fantastic Four, it was below Superman in that, even though it was a good film. Go back and see what we thought about it. Yeah, you had Captain America: Brave New World was, under Thunderbolts, which is a really good film. Movies are not performing as big. Even have, the Demon Slayer movie outperformed every comic book movie this year. So you have some anime stuff that's doing better than their $300-400 million summer blockbusters. So they're really going back and looking at, all right, what are we exactly spending our money on? Yeah. And with these huge budgets and stuff, because we're not getting that return, which I can get. Like, you're spending $200-400 million on something and it only makes $600 million. When you put in marketing and everything else, if you're only making $50 to $100 million or something off of a big film like that, it's, in the end, it's a disappointment to them, because you're expecting it to do significantly better than that.
How nice would it be to be disappointed by $50 to $100
I wish I could be disappointed
by
$50
real world
million.
Problems. Like, it's just unacceptable. $50 million.
Would have gotten it back. $50 million.
It's so silly to talk, but realistically, for the industry standards, it is. When you talk about that and you're not getting as high of a return on your investment, I just got to say, please save us, Spider-Man. I am so looking forward to Spider-Man. I really hope that's the one that really takes off and makes the next, $1 billion film, which confidently can predict that that's probably going to be the case. The hype around that's ridiculous. Doomsday, obviously, is one that it's got a lot of people buzzing about too. But yeah, it feels like we're in a weird time where just people are very choosy about what they spend their money on. Everything's getting expensive. And, we're some of the rare folks that kind of, no matter what, we're going to have our butts in a theater every week, practically, talking about brand new films and stuff, just because we love it as much as we do. But we're a far small, significant portion of the population that has the ability to do that. And, obviously we're thankful that that's the case. But yes, people are just so choosy on what experiences they have.
Yeah,
and
with getting much more expensive.
Yeah, everything's expensive. And you and I have talked about that before, where we'll just go and, if I hadn't, a lot of times I'm having dinner at the theater, we're ordering food when we get there, and it's not an inexpensive thing to do. It's hard. And I can't imagine, even you in your situation having, a wife and 2 kids, that's not a cheap night out to go out. And I see why so many people are investing so much in their home theater setups and having a nice place to just stay home and watch. That honestly, it's better experience in a lot of cases, because you're comfortable. You can pause a movie, you can talk, you can, do all those things. Not that that's stopping people from talking. I don't want to go on a tangent about that again, but you see what I'm saying, though.
Yeah, for a family of 4, with my family, to go to Pixar, Disney, or something like that we want to go to, you're looking at $15 a ticket for 4 of us, and then drinks and popcorn and candy that the kids want and stuff. You're easily spending over $100 to go to a movie anymore, and it's getting significantly more expensive. Like I was even looking at one that I'm going to go see with my oldest daughter here, and I was looking at the difference between the child prices and the adult prices, and it's a 75-cent difference. Like that's not really saving families much money. I mean, it's a savings, but how significant is 75 cents when the ticket's $20? Right. Like it's getting ridiculous. And I do have a take a shot moment here to talk back about budgets. I'm mentioning Godzilla -1 because we had a film that did gangbusters at the theaters because of its 15 million or less budget. It won a visual effects Oscar, and all of this was done on a very small budget. So you've got to think studios are going back and looking like, well, Godzilla -1 won awards, had a huge box office, and it had a huge box office because it only costs like $15 million to make. Yeah,
and you're going to start to wonder if studios are going to take that approach, especially with like comic book movies who do notoriously have like a bloated budget because they were banking on making a ton of money back on it. And if that's not going to be the case, do you wonder if the quality of the films will take a hit because they're not pumping as much money into it? Is the effects budget not going to be as significant if you're not as much guaranteed to make a ton of money off of these films? It's a very interesting back and forth on what's going to happen with these, and Fast and the Furious is unfortunately like the latest case of studio wanting the movie to be made for significantly cheaper because they don't know what the return on the investment is going to be now. It feels like if budgets are being pulled back, does that affect the quality of the film? We'll see. Time will tell.
Yeah, and it kind of makes sense to look at for final comment on it, because if they're going back to street racing, that should be significantly smaller budget because it turned into a spy, espionage, action, going to space type of film to where you have extravagant explosives and, helicopters being pulled down by chargers, and you have going to space. So you got CGI budgets. Like it ballooned because they were just going so over the top. So hopefully it's something they can work out. If it is, going back to street racing, that should be significantly less that you need to spend because you're not doing you can still have fun racing, and you could see what the original did on its budget with the special effects, as you had the blur where you still could see the racers and everything when it went on. That it should hopefully, but a lot of it is with the stars of what their asking price, and like Vin Diesel's asking price is going to be, especially even, Guardians of the Galaxy that he was a part of, and they have successful movies, that's going to jump up what they're going to be asking for.
Yeah, I still don't fully buy into the whole going back to the street. What does that mean? You know what I mean? Like they're going back to street racing stuff.
But in Lamborghinis and Ferraris.
Yeah, because they've gone so far the other direction with it. Like just not to get on a creative tangent, but you're just like, okay, we're going back to street racing. That's like saying everything that happened up until now was inconsequential, and you're just like what are we doing here?
It's a weird.
You may go back and have like a street race in it, and you could say you're doing it and that's your thing, but you're still like, you've done so much the other direction. You can't completely abandon that to just incorporate a street race too. You know what I mean? Like it feels silly to say that. And you say that and it'll be like the last scene of the film where everything's wrapped up and they're just like good and all their names are cleared and they're no longer wanted. And now they just show up and do a street race again.
With the 5 most expensive cars in the world. Or something. Like course. You would hope it would go back to being the Supra and the Charger and all awesome. That, and doing where the train tracks were and where Brian spun out and where the Charger flipped and everything. Like you go back to some of those areas, which are going to be significantly different now because of how long it's been. But you would hope it would have that kind of look back to what it had done. But yeah, you could be right. It could be the first half of the movie is them trying to figure out how to get out of the situation that they have them in and clear their names and be fully done and gone. And the last 30 minutes is a street racing.
That'd be fun. I'd be all for it, but we'll see what happens with it.
But I'm going to move us into our film review of this week, which is A Smashing Machine. So this is the story of Mark Kerr. It takes place during kind of gets the most significant part of his career, which was 97 to 2000. So this is where the UFC and pride fighting were kind of really starting to take off a little bit. I do kind of start off from the beginning of this, is that it's kind of weird how it was marketed, because it mentions UFC multiple times in it, but the majority of this film is about his time in Pride, which is in Japan, two totally different organizations, even though the people who owned UFC ended up buying Pride and kind of dissolving it, and things around 2007 that happened. But it was kind of weird with the marketing about UFC, even though he did have a significant, 2-event run with UFC 14 and 15 where he won the championships there. UFC had very little to do with this. It was all about Pride.
Right.
But yeah, this is 97 to 2000 of his life. It revolves around him going to Pride because he was getting bigger paychecks and, becoming a big star over there to the Japanese people, but also deals significantly with his relationship with his girlfriend, Dawn, who's played by Emily Blunt, who did a fantastic job in it. But this was a very interesting film that I have to say is Dwayne Johnson's best acting performance that he's done so far. Like, from putting on the prosthetics, like, it's sometimes prosthetics look like he was a different person. Yeah. Especially there's one where he's wearing a beanie and he's working out and his face just did not look anywhere near like Dwayne Johnson anymore. And other times it still looked like significantly. You're not going to be able to change him that much, but I think he did a fantastic job showing us a different side of a dramatic, of a sad, of a addicted guy, because he gets addicted to painkillers heavily and he struggles with his addiction. And I think Dwayne played it really well.
Yeah, I think he did too. And if you're a big MMA fan, you know how important fighters like Mark Coleman and Mark Kerr were to like the early days of MMA and kind of helping break down some of that stigma of it's just a bunch of guys bar fighting, like we're trying to do like this over the top violence. Because if you don't remember the early days of UFC, like it was very, very controversial. There was talk of them being, banned in the U.S. because of the violence and the brutality, and it was only available on pay-per-view. And we're obviously, as a society, much more desensitized to a lot of that now. Mm-hmm. And the UFC is so mainstream popular now, like it's everywhere. You can turn on, some sports channels practically any night of the week, especially on the weekends, and you can see different MMA organizations on TV. But the story of Mark Kerr is such a fascinating one because he was one of those early pioneers of MMA that, he dealt with the addiction and the personal struggles that he goes through. And, The Rock does a fantastic job of portraying that here. And they do pay a lot of respect to this time frame in his career and his mindset and how it was affecting himself personally. I thought he did a really good job of bringing that drama to this. Like, it was definitely his best role. There was some things, just knowing the history of the UFC, that it felt kind of like it has to be sensationalized a little bit for the sake of making a movie. But I think they did a fine job in telling his story too. And I love, like, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the very ending of the film, at least, where they have the quick shot of Mark Kerr, where it's just an instant shot to the real Mark Kerr and kind of paying the respect to him at the very end of the film, which I thought was a really nice touch.
It was also strange.
It was a strange cut, but it was a nice touch too. Yeah. Like, I don't know how I feel about it, but literally at the end of the movie, they just show Mark Kerr in a grocery store for some reason, and we're like, hey, this is him. Like, he's a pioneer of MMA or whatever, and just kind of paid that respect. But overall, a really, really solid film. I would say that Emily Blunt's probably my favorite part of it because she plays such this interesting, complex, emotional character in Dawn, his girlfriend. I thought she did a fantastic job.
She had to be all over the place with that because Dawn has her addictions and her struggles as well, but there's such a weird, crazy dynamic with the relationship because she's there for Mark, but when Mark's in fighting mode, he doesn't want to be bothered, and when he's drugged up, he's acting significantly different, so she's having to take care of him, but then he finally gets himself clean, and she doesn't know how to act anymore. Like, I kind of went back to where I have to take care of him now. I don't know how to be me. She's going out drinking and partying with her friends because Mark is, sober and not touching anything to make sure he doesn't go back to doing that. So there's her emotional state is just all over the place for this entire film, because there's moments where you feel sympathetic to her because Mark is kind of being a jerk to her and not treating her correctly. And then you get a scene where she's abusing him and mistreating him and telling him off for minor things and not listening. And there's just it's such a toxic,
very
just kind of insane type of relationship that they had. Like, it was just so all over the place. And like, I enjoyed the dynamic they had between each other. One of my favorites, it's one of the smallest kind of ridiculous scenes, but they go to a fair and she's trying to get Mark to go on the spaceship that spins, centrifuge spins in a circle and it pins you to the wall and stuff. But you get to see this guy, because Mark Kerr was a giant of a man. He was ripped in his prime time, and The Rock has always been like, this is probably one of the, he's bulked up a lot for stuff, but this is one where I say he's probably the most physical fit that he was ever been, like lean fighter kind of cut look to him and stuff, which matched Kerr very well. But it's funny to see a guy of his size and significance be scared of wanting to go on a carnival ride. And I don't know, it was his acting and Emily's acting. It was just something about that, just realness and rawness of that, and seeing a guy that big be scared of going on something that just made it like really humorous. But you also got to see some light and levity with, Dawn, because she's kind of enjoying herself inside there, even though, he's standing outside waiting for her because he's too scared to get on it. And just like asking the guy, can I stand in the center? Is that where? No, you can't stand in the center.
That's a liability. And then they do an immediate cut to him riding on the carousel. He's like, yeah, this is more my speed. Which is so funny.
Again, The Rock is what, 6'5"?
He's not a small man.
Riding
and he's just riding a
carousel
horse.
It's
funny. The optics of it are hilarious. But one of the things they do touch on that I really appreciate is like the fighters' mentality about how they approach like fighting and stuff. Like, a lot of times, a lot of these fights are sensationalized to make it appear like these two fighters just hate each other's guts, because you got to sell a fight. It's all about getting eyes, getting pay-per-view buys, getting people in the seats. Like, so a lot of these rivalries just have to be kind of manufactured, and they kind of talk about that, but they really dive into his mentality of, I've never lost a fight. How do you handle it? And they really do a good job of portraying that, especially when he's like being interviewed by the Japanese media, where they're like, well, what would you do if you lost? And you see that mentality that he has, that a lot of these fighters have, is just like, well, I'm not losing. I haven't even put any thought into it because it's not a possibility. I'm too good of a fighter. I don't think about losing, which fair, right? Like, you don't need to go in with an expectation you're going to lose and how you would handle it. And he just couldn't bring himself to answer it. And then he loses a fight, and you see him just lose himself in his, confidence. Like, his confidence is shattered. He's like almost panicking, really, because he doesn't know how to handle like losing a fight. And they do a really good job of like showing that throughout this film, because this isn't your typical like guy just goes through and mows down a bunch of people. Like, if you know anything about Mark Kerr's career, his win-loss record is terrible. He's only won a few more fights than he lost in his career, and he started out like 14-0, I want to say, or pretty close to that.
Yeah.
By the time he finished fighting, like, he ended his career on like a several fight losing streak, which obviously for this there's no need to go into that, but you really talk about that breakdown of mentality that he had from losing and what that did to him personally and how it affected him. Like, I think they really did a good job of exploring that in this film, that is a very real part of what these guys go through when they're fighters like this, especially when you're this up-and-coming fighter who's being built as, a new megastar who's an unbeatable fighting machine. Like, how does that affect you when you lose? Because there's very few fighters in the history of fighting that retire undefeated.
Yep.
Very, very few. And the ones that do are extremely special, upper echelon type fighters. And this talks about the very real reality that these guys who, this is what they do, this is what they know, and how do they handle losing, and how do they bounce back from it. And I think they did a good job of exploring that here.
Yeah, I liked how they showed you the kind of realness and rawness of the behind the scenes, because, a lot of the movie does deal with his painkiller addiction, but it's also touching on the real fact of what these guys put their bodies through. Like,
yes.
I believe the UFC started without gloves. It was like bare knuckle, wasn't it? Or at least just wrapped.
Pretty
it
close,
didn't have
yeah.
the padded gloves until later, and they started increasing the padding
It got a
and
lot
stuff
safer.
too. But they were, getting kneed on top of the head and the back of the neck, which can cause brain damage and other stuff with that. And you just see how bloodied and beaten that he gets after, and you get all the doctor visits, and you can see why a lot of athletes like that can get addicted to drugs or painkillers and stuff like that, because they're destroying their bodies. They're putting so much damage. And I did like keeping the touches of the cauliflower ears and other stuff that you see with the UFC fighters, which is a very real, thing that they deal with. But I did like that, because it's, how does what happens after the fight affect the person? How does it affect the relationship? How does it affect them mentally and physically? And they really touch on that in a good way. And going back to Dwayne Johnson, like I was really impressed by what he did here, because it wasn't only just putting on the prosthetics. He's still kind of doing an action-esque centered character, doing UFC fighter, but it's the way he held his body differently than he normally walks and everything else. Like, he's trying to feel different, and the subtle softness that he gave to his voice. So it's him, but it's still a little bit differently, and just the emotion that he was able to do. And I'll even give some love to the makeup people for the prosthetics, but also we know The Rock is covered in tattoos, and you have sequences where he's drenched in sweat and has bruising and cuts on his body and stuff, and it looked fantastic. Like, not only to be able to have to cover up all of his tattoos and everything else, is to be able to add on that realistic bruising and damage that you get after a fight. Like, it all looked really, really solid there.
Yeah, they did a fantastic job of making it look like he never had any of those things to begin with. Like, it was really well done, and a fantastic job of that. Like I said, I really like how they just dove into the realities of what these guys go through. Like, the UFC was notorious for being very unsafe and raw and violent, and I think that was the original appeal. But as time went on and as MMA became significantly more popular, it had to become regulated. You know what I mean? Just to have, if they wanted it to be commercially successful like it has been, you have to implement these things. And they had a really funny press conference. It just makes me laugh, because now these things are all in place. But you go back to like the Pride press conference that they have, where they're talking about these new rules that they're implementing and things that you can't do. That's kind of standard now, but this is how they had to approach it, because they literally say, and it's so silly now because you wouldn't think about it now if you've watched it for any amount of time, but they were like, no more biting, no more eye gouging, no more any of this stuff that...
Because there's almost no rules.
Like, you would think would be like, well, duh, you don't want to, like, it's a sported contest. You'd think these things. It wasn't. It wasn't something that people were thinking of back then, because it was literally like there were no such thing as weight classes. You had 160-pound guys fighting 300-pound guys. Like, the UFC at the very beginning is wild. If you get a chance to watch some of the older footage, like, it's night and day compared to what it is now. And, you have your weight classes and your rules and your types of gloves that you use, which still vary based on the promotion you work for too. Not everybody uses the same size like gloves and protections. You still have companies like bare knuckle fighting that don't have gloves, that just tape up your fists, and it's still bare knuckle like boxing and types of things like that.
Which I didn't realize was still going. Like, I was actually watching a volleyball tournament that was going on this weekend, because I got a family member who plays in it. And before that came on was Paige Van Zandt, bare knuckle boxing. I'm like, that's still a thing. I thought in this day and age, like, that wouldn't be allowed, but
still a thing.
There was a former UFC person, bare knuckle boxing.
And there's a few of them that are in that organization too. And then you have others like pro fighting leagues and all that other stuff. Like, there's a lot of it. There's a lot of it now. And it's a really cool look at the early days of MMA and how far it's come if you're a fan of the sport like I am. And just, it's really cool to see like the origin days of it and the early onset popularity of it. I love the interaction in the hospital at the beginning between him and the older lady, like at the doctor's office, and the kid. And he was just, she's asking him the questions that, people were asking at the time. Do you guys really hate each other? And he's like, no, we really don't hate each other. Or, it's like, is that thing they're trying to get banned? Like, it was a very real thing back in the day, because there was a lot of people that were like, it's too barbaric, it's too graphic. You can't show this on television, which look at how far we've come now. It's like one of the biggest sporting companies in the world now, making hundreds of millions of dollars a year and billions in some cases. But it's a fun look at the early onset days of MMA, and it was really well done. I really like, the way everything was presented. It felt darker. It felt grittier. Like, it wasn't super glossy in terms of the way it was shot. Like, I really appreciate that it felt the aesthetic of the time that it was happening. So a really well shot movie.
Yeah, and as I mentioned early on, like when I talked about, they kind of hyped this up as a UFC movie, but it was a Pride movie because, UFC is known for the octagon, and Pride is basically using boxing rings for everything still. So I think some could go into it expecting it to be a UFC movie, kind of like The Warrior was, which is another fantastic, MMA film. But I also did like another behind the scenes was that they kind of explained to the audience a little bit more, because at that time it needed explained with the press of what exactly is this? This is MMA. It's like, well, Mark Kerr was a wrestler. Yeah. But you have guys over here that could be karate, that could be jiu-jitsu. Like everybody is coming from a different discipline. So the fights can be so much, more significant and different. And you also have, like, they've talked with Mark Coleman, who was kind of a wrestler as well, but he changed to be more of almost like a boxer. So he mixed in a lot more boxing with, his fighting and everything. So it kind of went into the explanation, because when you think of MMA, like, well, what exactly are they doing? Are they all doing the same movesets? Do they all study the same, martial art form or something else? But this showed, especially early on, probably more of these days, a lot of them do a similar type of training and martial arts training and stuff with it. But back then it was pretty significant difference between how many wrestlers you had and grapplers and wrestlers you had in there compared to the straight martial artists that were in there. And I like that they touched on that aspect.
Yeah, and it's a definitely an important dynamic when it comes to fighting. And you have guys that come from certain backgrounds that fighters nowadays are much more trained to be more well-rounded. Mm-hmm. You still have things that certain people are significantly better at. You've got guys that are just one punch can knock you out kind of thing. And they do kind of explore that, like you said, where there was a push, especially from the UFC on their end, to make it more commercially appealing, was to not have guys just take you down and lay on you for five rounds and you win because you outpointed the guy. They wanted the more dynamic finishes where they wanted to see people getting knocked out. They wanted submissions. They wanted like highlight reel fights to get people hyped and excited for the promotion. And that's kind of where Mark Coleman became a little bit of a pioneer in that, where he was more of the wrestler turned striker. And I want to give a little bit of credit here to Ryan Bader, who is a famous UFC fighter, was in, the UFC for a long time, Bellator heavyweight champion at one point, plays Mark Coleman in here, it's so funny for me to turn my brain off seeing Ryan Bader play Mark Coleman, because he looks nothing like Mark Coleman. If you look at Mark Coleman, like, they could not be more diametrically opposed in how they look physically, but he does a fine job of playing Mark Coleman here, and given that he's not really an actor, but he lends that MMA, those credentials to this film, because he has been a successful UFC fighter. Like, having him play a role like this significantly in it kind of helps lend that credibility that you're looking for. And I think he did a fine job in it. I know he's not the most seasoned actor. He's only been in a couple things, but I think he did a fine job playing his, best friend Mark Coleman in this.
Yeah, I agree. I think he did a really good job in it, because you kind of felt like this is kind of how some fighters are going to act. This is how they're going to be, that he might be being told something really significant, like when Don calls him freaked out over one of the big turning points in the film. And he's like, okay, all right, I'll be out there soon. Like, just like, almost like nothing bothers him, but it's that kind of fighter mentality that they're thinking and they're planning and they're going after it. Like, it's not a fight or flight type of reaction from him. And I think he handled himself really well, but there was quite a few other like cameos by some other fighters. You also got Bas Rutten in there, which was awesome. That was fun to see him having a role, just being himself basically through it all, which was nice. But I think everybody did a very good job with who they were portraying, what they were doing. Is Dwayne Johnson playing a guy who was born in Ohio, who's Irish and like Puerto Rican, with The Rock being Samoan and everything else. But I mean, he matches about as close as I couldn't think of who else could probably pull off the size and the look. Like the only other one is Alan Ritchson, but he's much fairer complexion than what Mark Kerr was and everything else. But they all did a fantastic job, and it was really interesting to watch the dynamics between all of them, to be able to see the behind the scenes stuff of the fighting and the dynamics between, as you said, like most everyone thinks that these fighters hate each other and have to have this mentality that they hate each other going in. And that was a moment early on, as you said, in that doctor's office that really showed that Dwayne is doing something different with his acting and with who he's being, because it's such a big guy being so soft with this grandmother and with the grandchild and everything else, and joking with no fighting. Like, you see a guy who's here because of his last fight and getting beat up and everything. And there's even some funny moments where it's funny, but it's also sad at the same time, because after a fight in Pride, he's asking for painkillers because of it. And the guy's like, no, like, permission. And because there's a language barrier, but the Japanese guy is trying to tell him, you're not getting any of the opiates, because he just straight out, like, you got some opiates, you got this, and like,
very forward about it.
Advil. Like, oh, you want some Advil? They're just handing them out like candy. And he just takes a whole cup full of Advil and stuff. But it's funny, but at the same time, you can see that dynamic of an addict, of how he's reacting to not getting his way and not getting what he wants. And like, he's making light of it because he's mad, but he doesn't want to show that he's mad. So he's kind of belittling the guy who can't fully understand like what he's saying or doing. And that was a kind of could almost be like a throwaway little moment, but I feel like it did have a significance of looking at him and his addiction in that moment. Like, it was a funny moment, but if you look deeper at it, it's an addict struggling with not getting what he needs or wants.
Yeah, they do a good job of really portraying that, and the things that he goes through, and his journey to get clean and try to stay clean, and the ways that he struggles with that. And I think they did a really good job of portraying that, because it was a very real problem back in those days of MMA. And not to say it's not completely gone away, because there's still people that do that. And obviously there's much more stringent drug testing now than there ever was back then. Mm-hmm. Like, obviously you have, things that you can't put in your body and be able to fight now, obviously. So they do a good job of kind of towing that line back then of the very real struggles that a lot of those fighters had, that, were putting their bodies on the line for very little money compared to what they do now. Like, now these guys are, in a lot of cases, unfortunately, still not making what they probably should for putting their bodies on the line. And that's another conversation for another time. But if you're in that upper echelon of MMA fighters, you can make a very, very lucrative living off of being a fighter. And, without guys like that, without guys like Mark Kerr, that wouldn't be possible. Like, just helping really popularize the sport, not only overseas, but here. And, it's a very interesting study of, addiction and the things that these guys go through, and the mentality that you have to have as a fighter to be that successful. And it was a very, very well done and well told story, I think.
And they definitely touched on just a little bit. They didn't go too heavy with it on like what they're making to put their bodies through it, because you get him kind of trying to negotiate what his pay is, and it was like $3,000, $3,500 a fight, which isn't an extraordinary amount. You're like, how many fights a year does he have to do just to make almost basically minimum wage? Like, you think, oh, you're getting paid $3,500 for a fight. They're not fighting every single week most of the time. Like, back then they were fighting. I know in like UFC, when he was in UFC, I think it was July to October for 2 big events that he fought in. But if you're doing 2 fights a year at $3,500, you're not making anything. Right. So, but you got guys now who are doing a fight for $1 million purse just for that one fight, who could do, of course, like Conor McGregor, someone who became very big in the UFC, who could do basically 1 fight a year and be extremely comfortable and not have to fight anymore because of how much money. And they do briefly touch, especially towards the end, of just how significantly more fighters are making nowadays compared to then, because you got Kerr and those pioneers who, like, one of the big events in the movie, the main prize pool is $200,000, which is a significant amount of money, but that's chump change to what they're making now.
And that's, to be very clear, that's still the upper echelon of fighters.
It is, yes.
There's a lot of guys that are still like making their way into, guys and girls making their way into MMA that are not getting paid that. And there's another deeper conversation about pay disparity in MMA and what a lot of these guys who are fighting should be making in theory versus what they're actually making. It's still better than it was then.
Yeah.
But it's very top heavy. So the bigger stars, if you can make yourself to the point where you're a bigger star, a bigger draw, you'll make more money. But a lot of these guys that are fighting on the undercard still aren't making a significant amount of money where they're going to have to fight multiple times a year.
Yeah, because this was all about Mark Kerr was at the kind of the top and one of the biggest fighters, and he still wasn't making much to what's compared to the big fighters now. It's just so, and you can do that with all sports, like from, you know, our favorite baseball players back in the 80s and 90s, what they were making there to what, you know, the top players or even the middle players are now. Almost the lower tier players are making more than the stars did back in the day. Like there's been a significant jump for all of them on the top tier, and you still have some that are barely, you know, getting anything. Like if you're in the minors in a sport, you might be getting $30,000 a year to be in the minors, while, you know, some guy you're waiting to replace is making $200 million in the majors. Like there's a significant difference. And that's kind of what they highlighted a little bit here, is just from the top tier talent back then. I don't even want to know what the lower tier talent made in Mark Kerr's time. If he was making $3,500 a fight for a top tier talent, they paying the guys $500, if that to go fight him.
Yeah, it's crazy, the pay disparity for sure. But they do such a good job of highlighting a lot of that in a film that is a little under 2 hours, I think is what it was. It was about a 2-hour film that, you know, it's well paced and it's well shot and well done, and I really got a lot of enjoyment out of it. Like I said, Emily Blunt was fantastic in it, as she usually is, and this is easily The Rock's best role, I think, to date as far as acting goes. Like, he's not notoriously known as the best actor in the world, but I think he took a big step up here for sure.
Yeah, so The Smashing Machine is an entertaining biography film about Mark Kerr. You're getting to see some sensualized, upped stuff with his life, but you get to see a lot of stuff he went through. And I do believe this is, as you just mentioned, this is Dwayne Johnson's best performance. We maybe will see some awards nominations from, I don't know, especially with the year we've had, and we just had Daniel Day-Lewis come back as well, that you're going to see him winning the awards, but I could see some of them giving him a nod because of this, because he did a really good job. Emily Blunt could also get nominated for her role playing this toxic, crazy, kind of over-the-top, on and off girlfriend of his, but I think everyone did a really good job. It has a few issues that we didn't really, you know, poke too much at. My main thing was the very ending, which was a weird kind of wall-breaking ending that they did at the end that just kind of didn't feel like it fully fit in the film. But overall, I enjoyed it. I thought they did a good job. I've been back and forth on if I was going to give it a 7.5 or 8, but I think I'm going to give an 8 to it just because of how good Emily Blunt and Dwayne Johnson is in this movie. Like it's a pretty basic kind of story that they go through with, you get some gut punch, but it never gets into that really dramatic, hard hitting stuff, but it gets emotional. It could have just done a few things better, and it probably could have been much higher for me on that if they just tweaked a few things with the film.
Yeah, I landed on a 7.5 myself, just based on, like I said, they do a good job of highlighting this. This isn't like the most in-depth story because it is such a short period of time that you're covering, and they cover a lot in the short period of time that they do. But like you said, great performances at the top all around. There's not a ton of extra fluff that's thrown in here that's necessarily needed. It's a good look at a fighter's addiction, and you know, it's a well-told UFC story here that's not really UFC, but it's more focused on the Pride organization, but those are kind of one and the same now. But it was really well done. The Rock is easily in his best acting role in this. I could see him being in the consideration for some awards here too, but 7.5 I think is a fair grading for this for me, and I could see why you would give it an 8 as well, because I was kind of on the fence to it, but I'm gonna lean on a 7.5, but because I wasn't extremely blown away by the film, but it's a good movie.
It was right on the cusp of really blowing you away with stuff, but it just kind of left some things hanging a little bit that just didn't hit that emotional weight that it could have had.
Yeah, and if you nailed it as well, the weird way that it ended, just a cold cut to Mark Kerr after the ending here, where it's just him just walking around a supermarket for like 2 or 3 minutes and checking out and going to his car, and just like gives this awkward wave to the camera like, thanks guys, bye. It was just really weird and didn't feel like it fit in that film. Like if they could have just cut it at the end with The Rock's character here just like cutting off at that point, I think would have been fine. It was a little jarring, I'm not gonna lie.
That almost made me go from an 8 down to 7.5, but I'm like, the performances were enough for me to give, and my enjoyment over it overall was enough to give an 8, but 7.5 was very close to where I was, and yet that ending was just so weird to end it that way.
Yeah, it's still a really solid movie. Definitely one worth checking out if you're a fan of MMA. This is one you're definitely going to want to see. If you're kind of curious about MMA and you haven't really watched too much of it, I think it's still a really solid movie for you to check out. That kind of talks about some of the grittier early days of, the pioneers of the UFC here a little bit, with, Mark Coleman being one of the central, more popular of the what you would call OG MMA fighters. Like he's one of the more significantly popular ones. Like Mark Coleman is out here, still being talked about to this day as one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. Like he's definitely in that conversation. So you get to see a little bit of a backstory for those guys, and it was really well done, and one that I could see myself going back and watching again at some point. But it was still a really solid movie. If you're ever interested in some of the origins of MMA and like how they talk about it here, this is a film for you for sure.
Yeah, so The Smashing Machine is in theaters now. Go check it out. Let us know what you think of it. But this is, the best that Dwayne Johnson has acted and done, and I am really looking forward to see what he decides to do next, because he said after doing this experience was, I'm doing more stuff for me now and different things that's going to challenge me, instead of worrying about just cranking out blockbuster after blockbuster to make movies, because a majority of his movies they've been fun, but they've just been all right, just crank out another action movie, because he's like losing significant weight now to do another film with the director here where he's playing a 70-year-old man, so he's slimming down significantly to do it. So he's willing to change his physique, not only to bulk up, but now to finally like slim down, and it's going to be really interesting to see how he takes on playing in what sounds like a more quirky film after doing this one.
Yeah, I like him taking on passion projects now, because if you know anything about The Rock's not wanting for anything anymore, really. Like, he's made a ton of money. He's a very wealthy man, like very successful in almost all avenues of business and life that he's done. And now he can kind of focus on some more passion projects. I'm here for it. Let's see what else he wants to dive into and have some fun as an actor. I'm here for it. If he wants to take more risks, let's see it. I'm excited to see what he does next. But yeah, if you've seen him lately, the slim down is crazy. If you see this movie versus like a current photo of him, is wild. The stark contrast in his physique is crazy.
Do you forget how kind of smallish he was when he started wrestling? Like at first he was still a big guy, but compared to where his physique has been in the last 15 years or so, like he was significantly smaller then. So to see him for 15, 20 years being such a big, bulky, hulking guy to being a much slimmer guy, it was shocking to everybody. They're still talking about his appearance because of how shocking it was, wondering if he was sick, if there was something wrong with him. But he says it was for a movie, but it's that shocking to see how small he's gotten. He's still big, but significantly smaller.
Yeah, relative to who he has been and who he's going to be, for sure.
We are now partnered with Dubby Energy. Dubby is a clean energy drink to give you focus with no crash or jitters like other energy drinks.
Dubby contains vitamins, amino acids, and 150 milligrams of caffeine. It also features 0 calories, no sugar, no fillers, and no artificial dyes.
From Dragonade and S'mores to Push and Punch and Galaxy Grenade, Dubby has a wide range of flavors for you to choose from.
Use code WBTP to save 10% off your Dubby Energy orders, and look for a direct link in the audio and video descriptions. So now I want to move us into our TV review of the week. We have the last 2 episodes of Alien Earth. This wraps up what has been a wild first season of this show. It does feel like we're going to be getting more episodes based on the way they leave it off, but man, we pick right back up where we left off with, just poor Arthur, man. Like, that was just a wild ending to episode 6 with just absolute crazy shenanigans going on here. Like, we're in the midst of just a ton of infighting here in this community. You have Boy Cavalier, who is still he still thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, but you see stuff slowly start to crumble around him a little bit here in these last few episodes. And I was really, really hoping that he would have gotten some sort of comeuppance here, but it feels like we're going to have to wait a little bit longer to get that. He gets a little bit of comeuppance here at the end, but I was really hoping he wasn't going to survive season 1. I'm not going to lie. Obviously, heavy spoilers here because we're at the end of the season. We've been spoiling it this entire way, so it's kind of your fair warning here for the rest of the way. But we get a lot of interesting things in these last 2 episodes because you get more of these creatures being involved. You've got xenomorphs on the loose and on the hunt in the wild, and just all sorts of crazy stuff that happens to really kick off these last 2 episodes.
Yeah, these last 2 were, I feel, kind of polarizing to a lot of people because it doesn't exactly end in a way that we were expecting. Like 7 and 8 almost both felt like a setup to a finale that we didn't get. Like, I didn't hate episode 8.
Sure.
But it definitely felt like there's significant things that happen, but it feels like it's not a true to form type of ending to whether if they knew going in that this was 1 season, if that's how they ended after 1 season, it didn't feel like a significant ending for that. But even if they setting up for a 2nd season, it still left us with, all right, well, we're at an interesting point, but it didn't fully feel like a finale. Because 7, we kind of get more intrigue with it because we do have, Boy is getting more interest in the sheep and he's trying to figure out what to do there. And he starts contemplating, all right, I want to take this eye out of the sheep and put it in a human, but who do I put it in?
Right.
Because I'm not sure who I could trust. No, I don't want him to be too smart, but I don't want to be him too dumb.
Right.
I need to see exactly he's willing to sacrifice one of his employees or someone there to take over the sheep eyeball because he's going back and forth. And, he is asking different questions, asking about pie. And these are the first numbers. Do you know any more of it? And the sheep taps out the numbers of pi, and it's like, okay, so there's some significant universal knowledge that this sheep, this eyeball creature has. So it feels like more than the xenomorph, that eyeball creature has become the central kind of alien to this story because, yeah, we do get the xenomorph kind of gets, we learn significantly more about Wendy and kind of where her mental state is going because she's kind of turning against Boy and the humans, and she's contemplating, well, we're not synthetics like the other synthetics. We have a brain and a mind. We're not kids anymore, but we're not adults. And are we on our own side? Is nobody on our side now? And you also get to see, well, she's somehow able to tap into the computer systems and control things and go through the cameras and open up doors. And we see her definitely taking a turn like, all right, is she our hero anymore, or is she slowly turning into a type of villain in this? Which I enjoyed that arc of it because you really get to see a great dynamic played by her of this slow kind of brain always churning. What exactly am I doing or trying to do? What do I need to do? She's trying to figure it out all in real time. And you can kind of see that in her face and her head that she's planning and scheming, but you really don't know exactly what she's trying to do.
Yeah, she's such a fascinating character, and I want to give a little bit of a love to the actress who plays her. It's Sydney Chandler, who, if you don't know the last name, her father is Kyle Chandler. Who
That's surprising. I had no idea.
A phenomenal actor in his own right. Most notorious probably to most people for playing the lead coach in Friday Night Lights, the TV show. Incredibly popular actor. He's going to be in the Lantern series coming up here for DC, so you'll be seeing Hal Jordan. He's going to play Hal Jordan in the DCU. He's also been in Godzilla. He's done several big-time projects here. So the lineage there for her as an actress is phenomenal. She's got an incredible father to learn the craft from. She's a very fascinating character in this show now because she's been kind of the central synth throughout all of this, but she's definitely... You're seeing the switch go off for her where she's slowly starting to realize, hey, if this is my impression of what humans are capable of, are they really going to have my back when I need them to? And you see her kind of rallying the rest of the synths around this thought, hey, we're the better versions of these humans. Could we be? Like, what is to stop them if we were to band together and kind of, take over and do our own thing? And there's a very interesting dynamic at play here because of how things kind of wrapped up towards the end. Like you said, she's tapping more into her communication with the xenomorphs as well, but she's also got this 11-esque ability, if you want to compare it to like a Stranger Things, of where she has the telekinetic powers and she has like the strong intelligence of like computer systems and her ability to hack things with her mind. And she's a very fascinating character with some very interesting abilities, and it's going to be really interesting to see where they do go, because like you said, we've been so on the fence of whether or not we knew this was going to be just a one-off season or if there's multiple seasons planned. If they wrote it this way, only planning for one season, that took some guts, because it's a very ambiguous ending. Like, this is clearly leading to something in a second season that could be a very different dynamic from what we've had in the first one, because you go in thinking these aliens and these creatures are the real threats and the real like villains here, like the things that must be stopped, but that may not be the case anymore, especially if the head synth has the ability to control xenomorphs at this point. Very interesting shift in dynamics that we're heading to here with a potential second in season and beyond. I'm excited to see where it does go. I get where you're saying, because it does feel like it's incomplete if this is all we're getting. I will feel significantly different about where they end it, but just the way it feels like it's leading towards another season. Like, we have to explore this further.
Yeah, especially with the finale, you have some high-stake, big stuff that happens, and it's there, but it's much more subtle and controlled, because you have, as you said, Wendy is trying to figure stuff out, and she's trying to lead the rest of the Lost Boys with her, and it's more of a kind of a setup and scheming finale than it is like a significant action or horror or something else. Like, we got all that in that revisit to the ship episode, where we got all the tension and the horror and suspension, and the episodes after it didn't have quite as much to that. Like, we had some fun sequences because we also get Morrow has shown up at the island and he thinks he's got everything handled. Smee and Slightly have taken Arthur's body down to the beach, even though they we get the chest burster scene, which was great to see in that and stuff. And you get Slightly kind of panicking because he doesn't know what to do. He thought Arthur was going to be fine and safe. And, the alien creature is loose now and still trying to drag his body along. And then you get, Morrow showing up with his group, but it doesn't go exactly as Morrow planned either. So we get kind of a Kirsch has set a trap for him, because he's been listening. He's been watching. He's kind of been behind. And that's such another dynamic character that you're just getting the lightest of surface covered with Kirsch to know exactly like what is going on in this synthetic's mind. Like, what exactly is he with Boy? Is he with the Lost Boys? We've got a lot of balancing of like, are these good people or are these bad people?
Oh, yeah.
And we also got significant with Adam learning that he's a synthetic and that he's not what everything has been, and because he's been very dark with some things about basically telling Hermit, like, you either comply or you're basically going to be dead by the time you walk out of here. And, there is that sequence where Adam kind of tries to talk Boy out of doing the alien eyeball creature with the human, but because he's synthetic, he gives in like pretty quickly and goes away with it. But you got a little bit more dynamic with that, but it just it does wrap up in the end. Like, I need another episode this season to fully set me with a cliff. Like, it left me a cliffhanger, but it wasn't one that I felt like fully satisfied that we ended on that.
Yeah, and I get it. And what I really enjoyed about the last episode in particular was them kind of turning the Lost Boys kind of turning the corner there and kind of fully going in, because you have this face off with Boy where, they incapacitate his help and it's just him, and you're like, oh, he's finally going to get it. And you just see Wendy look at him going, run, and just telling him to run. And now it's this cat and mouse game where they're rounding up all of these people who they feel have done them wrong and who don't have their best interests at heart. And it's, all the people that you would think and suspect. And we do get a very fun fight showdown between Morrow and Kirsch, where they have it's been kind of teased back and forth that these two just don't like each other, that there's some distrust there, and they've built that tension a little bit throughout the season, and that does get paid off in a fun fight between the two of them where neither really wins in that instance, but you get a really cool fight there, but you get the Lost Boys here who are just kind of mowing through anybody that stands in their way at this point, and it's a really interesting tack that they're taking with them because they're not really killing the main villains here, because you leave on this ominous scene where they're in this cage that's been built very clearly for the xenomorph or like some of these alien creatures to kind of keep it in or and keep it contained, cage, you know? Almost like a Hulk cage, very, very similar to that, but they have all of these people in there, and now you see them. Like, it's left very ominously with them just kind of having that look like we're in control now, and you don't know what that's going to look like for everything going forward. And I can get where you kind of see where that's very unsatisfactory, but I'm leaning on the hope that they're already working on a second season, and we're seeing where things are going to shift now. Like, where do they go now that they have all these people contained? Like, what is their next motive? And that's kind of an interesting place to leave it on as a cliffhanger. But yeah, season 2 is going to be very interesting to see the shift in tone from the show to where the xenomorphs were the threat or the perceived threat, and now they are, but they're not.
Because now one's at the command of a synth, a xenomorph is, but then you have the alien creature, the eyeball creature, who's just kind of
doing its
own thing, which it does feel like that's setting, almost like the other stuff is a distraction from what is really going on with the eyeball creature, and that's going to become significantly different than we've experienced in an alien film so far.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely fascinating to see it go very violently from the sheep to Arthur at this point, where it takes over Arthur's body, which was very crazy. Mm-hmm. I just remember watching it going, "Oh no!" Like, "Oh no!" It found Arthur, and now it's taking over Arthur, and it's such a wild show, man. I had a lot of fun with this. Mm-hmm. I really did. Like, this is a show that I had zero expectations for going in, not knowing what we were getting. And week by week, I found myself just really enjoying the ride that it's taking us on. It did feel a little truncated, like it's only 8 episodes, but you were I could see the argument to be made, like, I wish there was like a 9th or even a 10th episode here, because they left it on the bone. But how many times do we see shows that take 10 episodes and we're like, oh, they could have condensed this down to 8 and it would have been awesome.
Well, this
feels like it's episodes. A little bit, it feels like it was a little bit flipped here, where it was like, we only got 8 episodes, but this could have been maybe 9 if they wanted to, or maybe 10 for just people like myself who just like round numbers. But like, I appreciate the fact that it leaves us wanting more, rather than it drug on a little too long and it could have been truncated to like in 8 episodes and it would have been perfect. This show didn't really feel like it wasted any time ever, which I appreciate, because the pacing of the show is fantastic. It gives you a chance to catch your breath when you need it to, and then it just jumps right at you with like action and crazy stuff to kind of get back and like, all right, here we go. Like, we're on a journey here. And I love that it takes a moment to catch its breath when it needs to, but it doesn't overstay its welcome either, because they jump right back into what they need to. So it's a good balance that they've struck, and I like that they've kept us wanting more rather than wishing they'd have left stuff out. I like it when it's formatted this way versus what we've seen on other shows, where it's just like, okay, they did too much backstory and too much diving in, that they could have paid a little less attention to this and really given us the meat of the story. They gave us a lot of meat here, but we want more, and that's good, in my opinion. Like, I think that's a good thing.
It's kind of comparing back what our discussion on Marvel Zombies was. That was a 4-episode miniseries that left us like we needed more, not wanting more, but feeling we needed more. Sure. And this one left us, I want more. Yeah. I want to see a little bit more horror, and I want to see a little bit more of what the synths are doing here this season before we jump into it next season. And yeah, it kind of just left you wanting, in a good way and a bad way, like both ways. Like it made me excited for season 2, that we can really see what Wendy and the Lost Boys and the synths are going to be doing with pretty much every single other person that's left alive is inside of that cage that the Lost Boys were originally in. And that was one of my favorite sequences of these final 2 episodes, is when the Lost Boys were locked up in there and Wendy was locked up in there, and Boy strolls in with Adam, like so cocky with his ball and everything else, like he's in such control and he has everything, and they're kind of talking down to the Lost Boys and stuff, and Wendy's like, okay, and flings the door open. Like, you just see Boy's face and the realization, like, I'm not in control as I thought I was. And like, that was just a great switching moment. Like, like boy's in trouble here. And she tells him to run and everything. It was just a really significant moment when she flips that door open and he's just, help me.
The flip and the power dynamic was really cool in that moment. It was a really well done scene and kind of sets the stage for everything that we've got coming up now and moving forward. One thing I like about this is there's no clear-cut good versus evil in this. Like, you would think it's like the Lost Boys and you're just rooting for them to do well, but based on how they're moving here, like, they may not be the good guys moving forward, and they may not be the right, like, who's going to rise up against them and who's going to stop them if they become too powerful. Like, it plays such a good dynamic of character development in here where it's like you're rooting for nobody, really, because like I've left a lot of these episodes wondering, well, like, okay, this person sucks. I'm ready for them to kind of get taken care of. This person sucks too. This person, I'm really rooting for you. It feels like the one guy we all rooted for was Arthur in this. Like, he felt like the one good guy, and even he didn't like make it out unscathed. You know,
even
what I mean?
I talked about Hermit. Like, I want to see him die because he's survived more than Ripley and significant characters. Yeah. Like. And he's still there. Like, he's a decent enough guy, but there's just something about that in the alien lore. Is like, I was even like, why is he still alive and around?
Why does he get so many
and
changes?
You see a significant kind of change and difference as he's seeing Wendy change and stuff. So I'm thinking maybe season 2 might not be good for him either. But it's you don't, like, Nibs kill somebody and went on a psychotic break, and you had slightly led to Arthur's death and still went through it, dragging his body, and Smee went along with it, even though he kind of stood up a little bit. He went along with it. And, Wendy, she's commanded the xenomorph to attack and kill people. And Curly, even, like, she was ready to turn on Wendy because Boy was her favorite. And that was kind of a great moment for me with her, because you kind of got annoyed at her because she's kind of going behind Wendy's back and trying to become the main person. And then when she's like, but I'm your favorite, Boy's like, no. And you see that kind of change and shift of, like, she thinks she's doing all this because she's the best and she's the favorite and she's going to take over for Wendy and everything else. And then Boy gives a moment like, I care less about you than I do, like, a pencil. Like, I don't care. I was using you to do what I needed you to get done. So, yeah, like, all of the Lost Boys, they all have significant issues and problems and things that you can cheer for, but also root against. And even, like, Hermit and Kirsch and Morrow and just, like, everybody
sucks.
They're kind of right there in the middle, like, well, if they die, they die. If they live, they live.
But it's fun. You can have some fun dynamics and playing with the story here, and I kind of like that. It's kind of refreshing, because it usually is such a hard line. Like, this is your hero. They're altruistic. They may be flawed, but in the end, you still want to root for them. And then you can make a little bit of an argument for, like, the Lost Boys in that sense. Like, some of their actions are kind of justified if you want to do some logic gymnastics and kind of dance around some of these things, but at the same time, like, I'm not really finding myself rooting for them either. Like, it's a fun dynamic to play of, like, I might like you this week, but I might hate you next week, and that's fun. Like, you can have some fun with that. Like, everybody kind of sucks here, and it's a fun dynamic. It makes for a really interesting way to tell some stories, and I'm kind of enjoying the path that we're on here with this, because it's a ton of fun. I've really enjoyed this season so far, and I'm excited for what's to come.
Yeah, it's been fun. Like, I enjoyed it overall. It had its dips and its valleys and its high moments and everything else, and it had some things that most first seasons have, that they're still trying to figure out this world and their story and where they're going. There's very few shows that come out of the gate superiorly strong, nailing everything. It's really that second season, like, it's like second through fifth or sixth is where most shows really find their heart, their soul, and their dynamic. So I am looking forward to, hopefully, they've said the viewership has been really good. It's been really well received by critics and fans alike. So that it seems like a second season is going to be greenlit, but nothing has been done yet. But I'm looking forward to see what dynamic we have in the second season after everything that they did in the first season here to kind of move us in a similar but different direction. We're still on the island. We've got a loose xenomorph. We have the humans captured and the synths in control. Like there's significant, interesting story to go with, and that's, like I said, it was a good and bad finale because it ended on a good cliffhanger to give us something to want for in a season 2, but also almost feeling like I didn't get enough of what I needed or wanted to see this season before you kind of ended it there. Like, a lot of people want more horror and more of that. It had a couple episodes before. It didn't fully dive too deep into the horror aspect, but it has some tension and it has some, craziness there. But I really do want to see how they go about this second season, because are we going to leave the island? Are we going to have the aliens, merge out into the rest of the earth and the world? What happens with Yutani and everything that was, kind of starting there, because everybody she sent in is, captured or dead now. Like barely anybody but Morrow is still alive after all that, even though technically he's not alive since he's a cyborg and everything else. But it's setting up for a second season that I don't know exactly where they're going with it. As you said, the Lost Boys aren't exactly heroes in this. I mean, which is weird because they're kids in human bodies. It creates such a mind twist with you because they're kids in adult bodies that are synthetic with kid brains, but they're doing adult stuff, and it's creating this, like, do I like them? Do I not like them? It's challenging your perception of everything that's going on.
Yeah, they're having to grow up very quickly, and you got to see how they're adjusting to having to do that, right? So, yeah, there's a lot to be explored. Obviously, it's called Alien Earth, not Alien Island, so eventually it's going to break out into more and where they go with it, and we'll see what they do. Do they, turn their attention on everyone else at this point? Like, there's a lot more to be explored for sure for this, and I'm ready for it. It's going to be really fun to see where they take off. There's a lot of meat on the bone to tell stories with, which I'm more than happy to get in another season or two, and we'll see the life cycle of this show and what happens. I'm happy that the viewership has done well. I'm happy that, people are liking it. We've both enjoyed this show, and I'm ready to see, season 2 and what we get out of it, because there's a lot of things that you can explore, a lot of things in the air, a lot of questions, and, sometimes that's a good thing. It gives you more opportunities to explore, because if everything were buttoned up, we want a season 2 at this point, you know what I mean? Like, would it leave us wanting to explore things further? And I think they did a good job of leaving enough on the bone for us to get some really meaty stories if we go into a second season here.
I'm waiting to see if they Jurassic Park us. So like the second season, we do get off the island with the aliens and we go into the mainland for a little bit. But then the next season, we just jump into another island where, there was another lab, or maybe Yutani had alien creatures on that lab hidden somewhere. And we just kind of jump from island to island. Oh, now we've got to go back to Neverland because, there was some significant that helped there. In my mind, it popped in like, are they going to Jurassic Park us? Because it could, like, we've spent everything on an island. They go into the mainland. Is it all going to be about the mainland, or are we going to go back into some more easier to contain storylines when you're on an island and you can control the population and what you have there, instead of like millions of people getting chest bursters put in them and you just have the earth overran by I would love to see the earth overran by xenomorphs and see exactly what that happens there. Like, there's significantly huge amount of things that they can go with this, whether it's focusing on the xenomorphs, where it's focusing on the alien eyeball creature, or if it's focusing on a synth army taking over and them, Wendy able to turn like every synth on Earth on humans. And we see that's actually the problem that we have going on here. Less xenomorph and alien, but more like a synth takeover.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of the direction they're going. We'll see where they explore with it. I'm expecting probably some kind of time jump a little bit forward to kind of get us to the next point, because you see where it leads, and then you see where it feels like they're about ready to branch out and take over. So maybe we get a little bit of a time jump here in season 2, a little bit ahead to where that plan has started to come into fruition a little bit. And then maybe we'll see what kind of resistance gets built up against them to kind of help counterbalance that, because it doesn't necessarily have to be xenomorphs, but they'll be involved in some capacity, and we'll see where the rest of the synths and what their plans for the rest of the Earth are, because you got to go somewhere after the island. So we'll see where the journey takes us.
Yes, we also got the dynamic: can Wendy stay in control of the xenomorph? Like, she's been able to command it and get it to listen and follow and listen to commands. Like, what happens when maybe the alien eyeball creature talks to it and convinces it to turn on the synths and everything else? Like, there's a lot of dynamic, a lot of room that they can play with this.
For sure. I'm excited for that. Absolutely. But Alien Earth Season 1 is a fantastic jump off to a brand new story in the world of aliens, where they come to Earth and it's just jumping off from there. It's a lot of fun. It takes its breath when it needs to. It's got action. It's got horror. It's got a ton of different elements to it. It leaves us wanting more, which I personally appreciate. I'm giving this season an 8 out of 10 to start. There's not without some of its minor issues, but I think the good outweighs the bad in this situation. And it leaves me wanting more, which will boost my score to an 8. Knowing that there's more meat on the bone here, and there's some really interesting stories that they could dive into for season 2.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I think it was fun. I think it could have upped the horror element a little bit more, but it also went, giving us some different things, cutting a little bit of the alien lore out. It's kind of funny because we're going to be flipped on from the Smashing Machine. I'm giving this a 7.5. Doesn't mean I didn't like it. I enjoyed it, but I do think there was some pacing, some story issues that they could have figured out. And the finale wasn't as, like the 7th episode left me more shocked than the 8th episode did. Sure. So I was expecting maybe a little bit more significant finale to it that maybe another episode or 2 could have really done, but I go back and forth. Like, did it even need that? Is it an okay ending? It just kind of left me a little mixed with how it ended, knowing that I want to see more. But with how it wrapped up, it felt like we built up to a lot of stuff and we just kind of got to the point that it's going to start going forward, and then it was done. But it was still a lot of fun.
Definitely looking forward to seeing where they go from here. All episodes of Season 1 of Alien Earth are available now on FX and Hulu and on Disney+. Go check it out. Come to our social medias. Let us know what you think about the show if you've watched it, if you've been watching along as well. Excited for Season 2 for that one for sure.
I'm just glad when things that you're looking forward to actually do end up being good, like the Smashing Machine. Like, we saw the trailers and went, like, that actually looks like it'd be pretty solid. It has its miscues and stuff, and same thing's Alien Earth. Like, all right, you're giving me an Alien TV series. Like, I'm here for it. Right. Let me see what you're going to do. And they made changes. There are some things they did off, but overall both of them are really highly enjoyable, and that they did a solid job. They both had things that they could have done better and improved on, but at least with Alien Earth they get a chance to do that in season 2.
Yeah, for sure. It's one definitely looking forward to. We got a good mix this week, and I'm really excited for what we've got coming up next week, because we have 2 films that both you and I have been looking forward to for a minute. And we jokingly like to say that we're glad when some of these films finally get to them, because we go to the movies so much. We see so many of the same trailers. I will be so glad to not see the trailer for one of these films after next week, now that we've finally gotten to it, but still not killing my anticipation of the movie at all.
Yeah, so next week, as he mentioned, we have Roofman. So if you've seen any film in the last, I think, 3 months, you've seen that Roofman trailer, and it hasn't dwindled my anticipation of seeing that movie. I think Channing Tatum is really on this great kind of rise of his career coming. It was never like fully dead, but you felt like he was kind of pigeonholed into an area, and then, you've had him do some cameos and stuff, and then he showed up in Deadpool and Wolverine, and now he's starting to get these films that really look solid with it. And Roofman looks to be that, but man, have we seen that trailer 1,000 times and stuff. But I'm still really looking forward to see that dynamic and seeing Kirsten Dunst. And, something, again, we just saw her in, it wasn't Warfare. What was the
Civil War
Civil War that she did? that we got to see her in that, and now we're starting to see her pop up in a few more. She's talked about, how she would love to be in the MCU if they want to bring her back, but a lot of her was like, I will take that paycheck for coming in the MCU more than she wants to exactly be in the MCU. I'll take that paycheck. I have a family. I'll take that paycheck. But I think, and hopefully that does happen, like Secret Wars or something else, that we get to see an update on her MJ, since we did get Toby back and potentially getting him back some more. But it looks like a good role for her and Channing Tatum and Roofman. That also got Peter Dinklage. It looks like it's going to be a lot of fun, but also it looks like it may have some heart and some soul behind it too.
Yeah, for sure. It looks like a really solid film, and I'm looking forward to checking that around and hopefully never having to see the trailer again, because it feels like it's been the same trailer for several months now, which I'm fine with because it doesn't feel like it gives too much of the movie away. But man, seeing the same trailer on repeat gets exhausting when you go to the theaters as much as we do. Yep. But excited to finally talk about that one.
We also have another film we're going to be checking out in Tron Ares. So this was one that for a while we didn't ever really know that was going to be happening. And then we just kind of get like, all right, we're doing a third Tron movie significantly long after. I mean, it was between Tron and Tron Legacy was a significant amount of time. And it's a pretty significant amount of time between Legacy and Ares. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see how they do this, because it's all kind of touching on AI and bringing the Tron world into the real world and creating an army from it. It's going to be really interesting. I still hope, because we haven't seen them and there's been talk like we're not going to see them. They're our main two stars from Tron Legacy. Hopefully there's at least a little bit that kind of wraps up where they are, because it's a significant character, two characters in the Tron universe that if we don't get any follow-up, it's going to be interesting to see if they do touch on it or if they just kind of move on from it, because there was talks like they didn't really want to come back, or that they just didn't decide to go back to them at all. Because you got Jared Leto, you do have, some returning, but basically it's all brand new cast.
Yeah, one thing with this film I'm looking forward to is the visual spectacle. Like, you may not get the strongest story coming out of it, and we could. I'm hoping I'm wrong. I'm hoping it's a phenomenally told story, but bare minimum, visuals on this movie look spectacular from the previews that we've seen. This is one of those, if you like the bright lights, explosions, and fancy imagery, this is going to be your movie in spades. And I'm excited to check it out just to see what they give us there. But this is one of those, go see it in your ultra high definition theater, like big time, visual spectacle blockbuster film. That's Tron Ares, and I'm very looking forward to at least that aspect of it. Hopefully the story of the film delivers as well, but visually I have no concerns about it being just a joy to look at.
Yeah, this is a film to see in movie theaters because of that visual and sound spectacle. Like, you went from Tron Legacy having Daft Punk doing the music to now you've got Trent Reznor, Nine Inch Nails doing the soundtrack to it, on top of the mix with the visuals. And we've got a little peek that we might also be getting some throwback stuff in this as well. So it's going to be a visual feast, as you said, and just hopefully the story ends up being something that we care about and entertains us for the about 2-hour running time that it has.
I'm excited. I can't wait to look at that one and talk about it next week for sure.
But that's all we have for you this week. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one.
To find all of the episodes of We'll Bring the Popcorn, go to our YouTube page, hit the like and subscription button so you're getting our episodes when they drop each and every Monday. If you're listening to us in the audio room on any of the podcasting platforms that we're on, please don't forget to give us a 5-star review. It really helps elevate the profile of the show. And don't forget to go to We'llBringThePopcorn.com, where it has all of our archive videos, all of our social media information, as well as our merch store, so you continue to support the show in that way. We cannot thank you enough for your continued support.